Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to begin this evening's board meeting. The school board meeting of June 23, 2015 is now called to order. The time is 6 o'clock p.m. At this time, we request that all electronic devices be turned off or put in the silent mode. Also, we ask that you please refrain from using flash photography, except during the special presentations portion of the meeting, of which we have none tonight. We would like to take this opportunity to remind members of the public of the district's mission, which is to ensure that each student reaches his or her highest personal potential and the district's vision to be a world-class school system. This evening's agenda includes the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, public comment on agenda items, consent action items, which include 1 item under Executive Services, 8 items under Business and Finance, 15 items under Operations, 12 items under Teaching and Learning, 1 item under Unfinished Business tabled items, 10 superintendent's recommendations, one of which is good cause. Dr. Graham, would you please provide an explanation for this item?
The good cause is related to the scoring of EOC exams. We now have the scores and the impact on our students, so I brought a recommendation back related to that.
As presiding officer, I find that there is good cause to add this item to the agenda. We have 2 items for public hearing, non-agenda public comment, and 4 items under other business. Board members, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Mrs. Fisher. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Ms. LaRiviere will deliver the invocation, after which Ms. Fisher will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the invocation.
Father, I thank you for this wonderful world that you created. I thank you for the fact that we know that your image is on each one of us, and how great is your grace and mercy. I have to think about that as I think about the small little church in Charleston and how they have responded with grace, mercy, and forgiveness in the recent attack at their church. May we all be as gracious whenever someone wrongs us. Father, I pray that you would guide this meeting, that you would give wisdom and clarity. And thank you, Father, that we are able to share thoughts, ideas, and learn from each other. And I pray that you would give us direction this evening. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
The next item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Martin, would you please address the agenda item of public comment?
School board policy provides the opportunity to address the school board concerning items on the agenda or other subjects relevant to the operation of the school district. The opportunity to address the school board concerning items on the agenda occurs at the beginning of the meeting at this time. The opportunity to address issues not on the agenda for this meeting occurs later in the meeting, just before board member comment. If you completed a card and submitted that to me before the meeting began, you'll be called in the order of the card submitted, with speakers commenting on agenda items called at this time, and those commenting on non-agenda items called at the later opportunity. If you have not submitted a card but still wish to address the school board this evening, the school board chair, Ms. Morgan, will give you an opportunity to indicate that desire. When you do so, please indicate whether you wish to address an item on the agenda or some other subject. You may speak at both opportunities, but must limit your comments to a subject for which that public comment opportunity is provided. If you comment on an issue not on the agenda during the agenda public comment opportunity, you'll be required to hold your comments until the non-agenda public comment opportunity. If you wish this evening to address an item that is on the public hearing portion of the agenda, which includes the adoption of the instructional materials plan, that opportunity comes during the public hearing. At the beginning of the public hearing, the board chair will We'll provide an opportunity for you to raise your hand to indicate that you wish to address that item at that time. You can only address that item during the public hearing, not during the other two public comment opportunities. The board does not respond during public comment time to remarks made by speakers. Comments concerning items on the agenda may be addressed by the board in their discussion on that agenda item before taking action. Comments concerning subjects not on the agenda may be addressed during board member comment immediately following non-agenda comment. Speakers are required to confine their remarks to educationally relevant issues. Attacks on individuals and abusive comments will not be tolerated. If speakers persist in violating such rules after receiving a warning from the chair, they may be removed from the meeting. Ms. Morgan, I have 8 cards this evening. Yes, 8 cards this evening, 2 as to agenda and 6 as to non-agenda items.
Is there anybody on the right side of the auditorium who wishes to address the board that did not fill out a blue card? Please state. And it's agenda or non-agenda? Yes? And is that non-agenda or agenda? And is it agenda, non-agenda? Anyone else? Yes? Anyone else on the right? Yes? On agenda. I'm sorry, Jennifer, what is your last name?
Thank you.
And Catherine Chercia, are you agenda or non-agenda? Anyone on the left side of the auditorium? Okay, yeah. Anyone else? Thank you. 18.
18, yes.
Would you please call the first card?
Our first speaker is Mr. George Fox.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Board. Had a chance to get a hold of Ms. Dessimore's papers from the briefing earlier to look at the tentative budget for next year. Got 3 minutes, right, Mr. Martin? 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, sure enough, the rollback rate is going to be in effect, down to 5.124. Sure can't count on that legislature to come through. No, actually, you can't. So what I've done is taken some basic quick calculations, catching on from the discussion just a little while ago. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Johnson if you could copy this and make sure everybody gets a copy, if you would, please. I'll give it to you when I'm done. Basically, within 5 years, with a half-cent sales tax and the debt reduction, it can be gone. Last year, the county, Lee County, and their half-cent sales tax revenues was right at $68 million. It's a shame that the school district didn't participate in that as well. And a 1.0 debt millage would generate $68 million based upon property values of 68, a little over, almost $69 billion in Lee County. That'd be $136 million per year, with the total debt, including the 3 new schools that are being authorized to be built, Bonita, East, and the middle school, approximately $600 million. Could pay the whole thing off in a little over 4 years, and $90 million of that would be paid by tourists, visitors, and non-residents of Lee County. It's a pretty simple plan, basically straightforward to the public. Got a pile of debt. It's already been taxed. The tax has already been done. It's just a matter of sending out the bill. That's all you're really doing here. It's a very simple, straightforward plan. Everybody can understand it. And the benefits to the students, the county residents, everyone, relieving it, there is nothing better than paying off debt. It's the best thing. Also, one other thing I noticed during the presentation, talked to Amy about it as well, got $100 million in debt, in investments in stocks, Apple, Starbucks, whatnot. I wonder how much that's returning. They're good investments. They've gone up. Great. Might be time to cash them out and pay off some debt. It's $100 million maybe that you could pay right there. Why let it go down? And I'm not sure what the dividends Apple pays, or Starbucks, but it's not anywhere near what we're paying in interest on the long-term debt of this district. So those are two great things to consider. I hope the board does and moves and acts immediately on getting this on the agenda and onto the ballot for next year in 2016, get voters' approval. Thank you very much.
Excuse me for not saying so. Since we have less than 20 speakers, the time per speaker is 3 minutes. The next speaker is Mr. Kevin Regal.
All right, good evening. I'm here to discuss the approval of the reappointments for the 2015-2016 school year. Hopefully I can get the message out a little better now. I only had a minute last time. The superintendent and I have had some good meetings about this. I just have some really deep concerns, and I wanted to bring it up now since it's going to be voted on at this meeting. The first person, I brought this up before, it's the person who received the DUI conviction. We know that he had a minor in the car at the time. We know when he was convicted, he was told not to drive by order of a judge for 6 months. Yet, he still drove the athletes around. You have to understand the judge looks at the person and says, do you understand your rights? You're being revoked, your license for 6 months. Yes. So when he goes ahead and drives athletes around and puts them in harm's way, that's on him. That's step one. Okay. He was on his 90-day probationary period when this occurred, yet he continues to get reappointed time after time. Okay? The person I'm objecting to, one of which is Lehigh Senior High School teacher John Solak. I know the superintendent and I have talked, and I said, listen, to the public, it looks like since his father was a teacher in the district for 30 years, many of which under your leadership, it looks like he's being given special favors. And it's just not fair that we let all these other teachers go during their probationary period, but we allow this one not to. I keep getting asked, what is your beef with him? Nothing, we just need to be fair. We need to be equitable, and we need to treat every single person the same way with our eyes closed. That's what anybody would expect. The next person has been accused of bullying by teachers and parents and students. I hear on the side his investigation was not legit, and he was protected. I know for a fact that a racist video was shown to his assistant principals during a staff meeting called The Ben Show. It's a racist football video which demeans African Americans, Jewish people, and Asian people, and he found it to be hilarious. He hired his nephew 3 years ago in a show of nepotism, although other applicants were more qualified, including former superintendent Mr. Browder. When his nephew's certification ran out, he still allowed his nephew to illegally hire coaches and drive athletes home from football practice. He is embroiled in a controversy regarding graffiti in this year's yearbook. He's made egregious errors in judgment as relates to the Cam Boland NHS situation. So the person I object to for rehire is Fort Myers principal Dave LaRosa. How much time do I have, sir?
25 seconds.
25 seconds. Well, I guess I will end it there. Thank you for listening.
Those are all the cards as to agenda speakers.
Okay, Bob Valenta, please.
Thank you. Item 6C, approval for a bid for fresh produce for $2.5 million for 86 or 88,000 students is about 16 cents per day per student. That's pretty cheap, or we're not really feeding them that much fresh vegetables. And I know that goes against, my normal, that schools really shouldn't be in the business of feeding kids, and I still believe that, but that aside, if we're gonna feed them, why are we only feeding them 16 cents worth of fresh vegetables and probably a couple of dollars worth of junk food? So that's one thing. The other thing is you've got unfinished business, 5A, and it kind of ties in with, what is that, 6F and G, which is yet more bus parts and repair. I've lost count of how many meetings we've actually voted on and approved bids for bus parts and service. I would think that we would just do that once a year. And yet, I'm gonna go back through all the agendas and I'm gonna find probably over a dozen. I mean, I can think of the last 4 or 5 meetings where we've had something to do with buses and parts for vehicles. Are we trying to snow the public and not let them see the big figure all at once, and we're just trying to piecemeal it? I'm asking. Thank you.
Mary Sirota? Oh. Okay. Next is approval of action items in the agenda under consent. Board members, are there any agenda items you wish to pull for discussion?
I have no polls.
I'm sorry?
I have no polls.
I have none. Mr. Twyver? I have none. Ms. Riviere?
No polls.
And I have none. Is there a motion to approve the agenda's consent action items?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Mrs. Fisher. Fisher, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Graham, do you wish to acknowledge
Yes.
any appointments?
Yes, I'd like to recognize Tracy Zeniani. Finally learned how to say her name, and Tracy is moving from the River Hall Elementary Assistant Principal to Harns Marsh Principal, her first principalship. So welcome. And Rhonda Amaya, who has been the assistant principal at Tice Elementary, and one of her many claims to fame is the dual language program that she has overseen and gotten going so well at Tice Elementary. She's been an advocate for the ELL population for quite some time. She is going to become the principal of Tice Elementary. And Soretta Ralph, who has been our Director of Elementary Curriculum and Staff Development for the past year, is going to take on the role of the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Soretta was a superintendent for 8 years in Kentucky and then moved down here and decided to come work with us last year, and has been a gift to our team, and she's now going to take on this new responsibility as assistant principal, sorry, assistant superintendent for teaching and learning.
Okay, we have a motion made at the June 29th meeting. Would you please read it? Under unfinished table.
Yeah, I got it. I
Okay.
just need to make it big enough to read it. Got new glasses and I'm not sure. I recommend board approval to renew bid number B147180JM for Navistar International OEM Parts awarded to Wallace International Trucks, Inc. for the first renewal period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016 at the estimated annual expenditure of $1,500,000. Pursuant to the same terms and conditions as previously approved by the board, approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. The action was postponed until this meeting. The motion is now on the floor. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Superintendent's recommendations.
I recommend the school board amend its action taken at the April 28, 2015 regular school board meeting to exclude the results of the EOC assessments from the student grade calculation, using such results only for diagnostic purposes by limiting the scope of the action to only include the EOC results that will be delayed, which are those for Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher,
Second.
seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Discussion. Ms. Fisher, you made the
Okay.
motion.
I know that we're in receipt of a letter of response from the Commissioner of Education, responding to the letter that we had Mr. Toivonen deliver to the governor. And she explains that, that we are in violation of the law, and that since we have the results back on the civics, history, and biology, that we would not be granted a waiver at this time. And my discussion is that since I made my part of the decision based on the information that we had at the time, which was that we would not be receiving any of the results until fall or December of the year, so I would be willing to consider changing my vote on those 3 exams that we already do have the results on.
Thank you. Other comments? Mrs. Dozier?
Well, I was looking for the information that was sent to us by the superintendent, and I am trying to pull it up, but it's not coming. It's searching. Okay. When we first had this information, and we said that the information would not be forthcoming until December, I think that was the reason and the rationale for making that motion and for us actually all supporting that. Since that time, the students have taken the test, and these are the results. Out of the 5,595 students who took the biology test, 94% would have no grade change as a response to this being counted as 30%. Out of the 3,690 students who took the U.S. history test, 91% of those students also would not be affected in any way. So I guess my question to you, and then there's also the 95.7% of the students out of the 6,217 students who took the civics would have no grade change as well. Are we going to do anything with the consideration of those? Are we going to analyze those percentages of students? It would be 6% for the biology. It would be approximately 9% for the U.S. history, and about 4% for the civics. Are we going to look at those students to ensure that their grade would not be
The percentages you read, either their grade doesn't change or it increases.
Okay.
The rest, those smaller percentages, there may be a grade change, but no one is failing and no one is going to be kept from graduating.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other comment? Mr. Toivonen?
Well, we're talking about 307 students, 335 and 267, which is a total of 909 students. The original letter, and again, we received back from the Department of Education a response. We have not heard back from the governor. But the Department of Education basically said, here's the rule, and it's going to count 30% for all the 6. Oh, but then we screwed up, and now only 3 are going to count. So, they make excuses, and their excuse is okay, our excuse is not. But based on the information, the fact that they didn't give us the information in a timely manner, we made a decision. So the letter, what we wrote to the governor was, look, for all the ones that we count everything that we had the information on. But for us to go back on our word on the ones that we already had, that it's going to harm them, whether they fail them or not, it's going to harm them. We said we don't want to count that. So I would like to make a motion to amend the superintendent's recommendation that we count all the grades that it has no effect or it's a positive effect, and the 307, the 335, and the 267 we don't count, because that's what we gave our word, that's what we did our test, and that's what happened. And if the state says we need to test it, again, it all goes back to, look, you weren't perfect. You didn't tell us the information. You thought you were being crafty by not giving us any response so that people they didn't trust us, that people would Christmas tree the tests. And so in lieu of that, they weren't forthwith with the information saying you will get tests back in a timely manner. Because of their less than candor and of the way they handled it, I believe at this point we would have to, going back on our word, we're detrimentally impacting students. And so, based upon the information, I stand by what we did, and I would like to make the recommendation that we count all the students that have either no impact or a positive impact, but the ones that 307, 335, and 267 that we report to the state, these are numbers that we will not be counting this year based upon based upon our information that we had at the time we made the decision.
And you have made a motion. Is there a second?
I will second it for discussion.
Okay.
So what you're basically, did you read the letter that we got from Pam Stewart this afternoon?
And let me just insert, if I may, if you would indulge me, Mrs. Dozier. I did get a call from Pam Stewart this afternoon. It was a voicemail, but essentially she said that she had spoken to the governor, and she was speaking for the governor. I did not know she was going to send a letter. She basically called to say that she had spoken to the governor, he was busy, he hadn't had time to respond, but essentially the position was that the 3 tests would stand as it was. There would be no change. So I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, Mrs. Dozier.
Because basically the last statement sums it all up, and when I read the letter, in fact, I received the letter a little after 5 o'clock, I made the assumption that she was speaking on behalf of the governor, not knowing that you had had a phone call. But the last sentence says, we will be working to make sure Florida students are not over-tested. However, there is no basis in supporting a waiver of the 30% grade requirement. So, in other words, what they're saying is that there is nothing that they're not going to even consider the request that we made, which I think we made that, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, is that correct? And so that was the reason and rationale for me asking all of those questions to you, Dr. Graham, because I am perfectly comfortable with the vote that I made. However, to be in compliance and to try to play nice in the sand with the powers that be from Tallahassee, if you are telling me that no student is going to be harmed as a result of the fact that they took that test, I guess that's the piece of information that I need in order to be able to support the amendment that was made by Mr. Toiber.
The smaller percentages, their grade will lower, but it will be, for instance, someone may have gotten an A, and with the 30% in, it would drop to a B. But what I'd said earlier, no one is going to fail. No one was credited with less than the equivalent of a C on the EOCs. So there's nothing none of those calculations will bring anybody to an F.
So what you're saying is that none of the students failed the test.
Correct.
As a result of
The cut scores that were applied.
scores that were applied.
Correct.
And
The other thing I will say is that these percentages are much higher than they were last year. And so last year, there were many more students whose grades were lowered as a result of the EOCs.
Ms. LaRiviere.
And I just want to make sure I heard correctly. So the lowest scores, there was nothing lower than a C that any of the students received.
Based on the cut scores that were applied, yes.
I'm going to ask you all to please be quiet while we have our conversation. Thank you. Other discussion? So we have a motion to amend the superintendent's motion, which is would you mind restating that, please, Mr. Toiber?
To count all the test scores that either stayed the same or moved a grade upward, but all the ones that dropped, that that hurt our students, to not count the grades that will hurt our students.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Martin, if you would please talk about the difference between the First Amendment and the Second Amendment in terms of board liability and superintendent liability.
Well, with the two options that you have discussed at this point, if your decision was to basically reverse the prior action or maintain the action only as to the math EOCs, it would appear that by taking that action that you would then come in compliance with law, and in that context, the risk that you would eliminate is the risk of penalties from the state, from the legislature, or from the Department of Education. The risk that you would maintain, because the risk that you would maintain in that decision is one that has been discussed before, that students took this test with an understanding, or at least a representation from the school board, based on the school board's action, that the results of the test would not be used in the calculation of the grade. If they're now used in the calculation of the grade, and I understand from Dr. Graham's explanation, there would not result in any student failing, but it would potentially result in a lower grade, and I guess a lower grade point average. So you could potentially face there is some risk there based upon students taking certain action based on reliance on the board's action, and incurring some detriment as a result. The option that you've been presented with through the amendment would appear to eliminate the second risk that I just spoke about with respect to injury to students, because it would not result in any students having their grades lowered, yet it would not bring you into perfect compliance with law, because the statute does require that those three tests, the results of those three EOCs, be included in the calculation of the grades, so you would maintain the risk, potentially, of penalties being imposed by Department of Education.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher.
Yes, and further after that, then, Mr. Martin, when you say penalties, could you define that?
Give me just a second, excuse me. Florida statute provides a process by which the State Board of Education can review the actions of an individual school board, and if they believe that the individual school board has failed to comply with law or state board rule, give notice to that school board, and if they fail to come into compliance within a certain amount of time, the potential penalties are to withhold the transfer of state funds, state discretionary funds, discretionary lottery funds, or any other funds specified as eligible for this purpose by the legislature. Declare the school district ineligible for competitive grants is the other potential penalty to be imposed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Teuber.
Mr. Martin, if they were to withhold funds, would we have standing in federal court to withstand that, to sue the Department of Education based upon their conduct, and have standing to pursue that?
If there was in fact a withholding of funding, yes, I think there would be some basis. I wouldn't suggest federal court, but there would be some basis to file legal action to determine the rights of the school board with respect to that issue based upon the deprivation of that funding.
Would that be administrative then?
It could potentially, I think that is one option, as through an administrative hearing. I think a declaratory action in a local state circuit court could also be a potential action. Those are opinions. I have no authority to rely on with respect to that issue.
Other board questions, comments? Mr. Toiber?
Board, it all goes down to, what do we stand for? I'm not saying, I don't purport to want to break the law, and I don't think we defiantly broke the law, nor did we intend to break the law with the intent of defying the Florida statute. The House bill was enacted. The Department of Education had weeks upon which to give us information to be able for us to make our best judgment. They failed to do that. For them now to come back and say, well, it doesn't matter the fact that we dropped the ball and we kicked the can down the road for all this time, you guys still should have just, once we finally got our act together and retroactively said, well, these are the rules, you guys needed to fall into compliance. I don't know if push comes to shove at this point, is that a hill that you think in an election year that the governor wants to die on? I don't know if the public scrutiny, we offered them a solution to hold all of our kids harmless, to get out of this situation, which, we didn't create this testing debacle. We didn't put these information out there and fail to give us the proper edicts upon which to comply. We did what was the best interest of the children. I stand by that because I think we did what was prudent. For us now to change and put children in harm's way just because the state tells us, we don't care how bad we screwed it up, the law is the law, I don't think that's the way this board should take its fall. And I think at least at this point, make the point to the state, look, we're not defying you for the sake of defying, or we're not defying you because we didn't want to make the test. Had you done what you should have done, all of this argument wouldn't even be taking place, or this discussion wouldn't take place. But the fact that we were forced to make a decision, albeit, in retrospect, would have been a different decision, that doesn't give us, I don't think, the latitude to put children in harm's way. So that's what I'm just imploring the board to just consider, to stand on, a small hill, saying, look, we're not trying to do anything wrong other than, if they want to censor us for 900 kids, that's 1% of our student population. I think that at the end of the day, it's worth a censure or whatever they may, if they continue to push, or we take it down that road. But I don't believe they're going to punish the entire district. I don't believe they're going to, do something that's going to look vehemently wrong in the sense of doing this, because we went there with good intentions. We approached them with remorse. We tried to solve the situation by going there in person. It's not an issue of, it's not a battle we want to fight. We just want to get this thing moved and move ahead. So, I think if we continue with our stance, we keep without protecting kids. And I think for us to roll over just because it's the easier way to go, the path of less resistance, but we only harm a few kids, I just don't think that's the message that we want to send.
Mrs. Dozier?
Thank you. I will be supporting Mr. Toiber's motion because the evening that we voted on this, I think it was back in April, and at that time, it was Tuesday night, I believe, before the EOCs were to begin the next day. We gave our word, I think, to parents and to students, and I think students were well aware of what was taking place. And if we can't, if our students cannot depend on us to do what we say we're going to do, then we're not worth much. So I'm going to have to support this.
Just one point of clarification, some had already taken the EOC. The majority took it after that vote, but some had already taken it.
Well, I think the ones, to make it perfectly clear, we're talking about the ones that took it after the day that we took the vote, because those are the students that would be affected by what the decision was made here at this table. That is what you are.
Yeah, and I guess the question I have for you, Dr. Graham, is of these percentages, I don't want to harm the ones that detrimentally relied. The ones that, if they're somewhere in this group that were actually before we took the test, I don't know if that's really, that's a whole, I don't think the numbers are going to be any relevancy yet, because like you said, the majority.
I wasn't suggesting that, I just wanted to be clear.
Clarified.
Other comment?
Yes, I have another question for Mr. Martin, excuse me. With the sanctions or the withholding of funds and making us ineligible for grant funding, Is there any other sanction that would happen? Like, would people lose their licenses or teaching certificates, or is that not implied in the statute?
That's not addressed in the statute. Yeah, there are other rules with respect to actions taken against an individual educator's certificate. That's not addressed in this particular statute.
So then, if there was a decision made solely by board members, which was not in support of the recommendation of the superintendent, then, for instance, the superintendent or people administering the test would not be at risk of losing their licenses.
I can't answer that question.
Yeah.
There are provisions certainly that require employees of the school district to comply with law. How the state would address those issues in terms of an individual certificate, if their employer, their school board directed them to take the action, I cannot say. I would certainly venture advice that the fact that it was done in compliance with the direction from the school board would be a mitigating factor in any consideration of discipline, but I can't give you any guarantee in that respect, of course.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Aye. Motion fails 2-3. So now we revert to the original motion. Is there discussion on the original motion? Seeing none, all in favor of, let's restate the motion, please.
I recommend the school board amend its action taken at the April 28, 2015 regular school board meeting to exclude the results of the EOC assessments from the student grade calculation, using such results only for diagnostic purposes, by limiting the scope of the action to only include the EOC results that will be delayed, which are those for Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Dr. Graham, would you please read your next recommendation?
Approval to adopt the USDA community eligibility provision for schools that meet the program qualifications and district parameters for the 2015-16 school year at no cost to the district. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Fisher, seconded by Ms. La Riviere. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval to renew bid number B137134BC for fresh produce awarded to Sun Fresh Produce, Inc. for the final renewal period of July 1, 2015 through June 30, 2016, or until new bids are received and awarded at the estimated annual expenditure of $2,500,000, pursuant to the same terms and conditions as previously approved by the board. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Mr. Teuber. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval to renew bid number B147188TA, an annual bid for snack products with U.S. Foods, Inc. for the first renewal period of July 29, 2015 through July 28, 2016, at the estimated annual expenditure of $500,000, pursuant to the same terms and conditions as previously approved by the board. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Ms. La Riviere. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval to piggyback Collier County Schools 71-1/15 for commodity processing services awarded to multiple vendors for the period of June 23, 2015 through May 31, 2016, at the estimated expenditure of $500,000, with an option to cancel if deemed to be in the best interest of the district. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier,
Second.
seconded by Ms. La Riviere. Discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval to piggyback Brevard County School Board bid number 14B064DR OEM bus parts and accessories discount catalog bid awarded to multiple vendors for the period of August 12, 2015 through August 11, 2016, at the estimated expenditure of $500,000 with an option to cancel if deemed to be in the best interest of the district. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Dozier. Any discussion? Mrs. Dozier.
Well, I have to agree with the public comment that was made regarding this item. We seem to have repeated recommendations for transportation, bus parts, accessories, and so forth. I have to agree with the fact that it should be a one-time thing and maybe one amendment, budget amendment during the year, but this is repeated, so can you tell us why?
I think part of it is that different companies get different contracts and the terms of the contract. So for instance, this one goes from August 12th to August 11th. Some of the others started in June, so I think it's about timing. I am going to ask that Dr. Adkins collect for your information. I'm also going to ask him to talk to Mr. Valenta to, we'll list them for you so you can see, but I think it's mostly about timing of contracts at this point.
And I think one of the things that might be beneficial as well is the total cost that we've had in board recommendations for parts and stuff.
Yes, that's what I'll have Dr. Adkins put together.
Other discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval to piggyback Collier County School District bid number 74-1/14 for AC parts, equipment, and supplies awarded to Johnstone Supply, Naples Armature Works, Tropic Supply, and United Refrigeration for the period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016, at the estimated annual expenditure of $900,000, with an option to cancel if deemed to be in the best interest of the district. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all documents.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
By Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Dozier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Approval of the agreement with the Tri-County Apprenticeship Academy to initiate and continue the funding of the apprenticeship program for the 2015-16 school year at an estimated amount of $502,644.79. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute any related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Dozier. Discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval of the renewal contracts for occupational therapy, and physical therapy assistance, and authorization for the superintendent to execute related documents and authorize the expenditure of an estimated total cost of $900,000 effective July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
By Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Approval of the contracts for speech language, occupational therapy, and physical therapy services with Solian Health, Inc., Community Rehab Associates, Inc., Speech Rehab Services, LLC, Boca Speech Center, LLC, and Elite DNA Therapy Services at an estimated expenditure of $9 million for the period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30, 2016. Approval authorizes the superintendent to execute all related documents.
Heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Dozier. Discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Graham, would you please present your recommendations for this evening's public hearing items?
Oh, we have Southwest Florida, don't we?
What?
Do we have one more? Southwest Florida College?
That's
That's one of the
public
public
hearing.
hearings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public hearing.
Approval of contract extension for Florida Southwestern State College for Florida Southwestern Collegiate High School, Lee, a 9-12 grade school covering a term from July 1, 2015 to August 31st, 2015. the board conduct a public hearing on all objections received concerning the board-adopted instructional materials for the 2015-16 instructional materials plan.
We will now recess the regular school board meeting and open the public hearing. At this time, the public hearing this evening is to consider the approval of contract extension for Florida Southwestern State College for Florida Southwestern Collegiate High School Lee, and approval to hear objections to instructional materials adopted and confirm previously adopted instructional materials plan. At this time, the public will be invited to speak on these two items. The time allowed for comment is 3 minutes. Is there anyone on the right side of the auditorium who wishes to address the board? We'll start in the first row, and I'm just going to have you come up in order, by row.
I did email everybody on the board. Unfortunately, I got one back refused concerning the books that we'll be using for 2015-2016. I did ask for a meeting with one of the board members, and I did get the email today that you're willing to meet me next week. It's kind of after the fact. The books are inappropriate. My concerns are religion being taught in public schools. That is not the place for religion. Religion belongs in the church of your faith or at home, parents to be teaching. I saw a 38-page in the world's history for 6th grade that's all about Islam and Islam culture, which is not factual. Yet I see nothing for our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, or the Federalist Papers. I don't see our history being taught to our children. I find that disgraceful, that we would approve a book that's not teaching our children our history, our culture, how we became America. So I do object to those books. I was floored by the health book. It's disgusting. It's pornography. My granddaughter will be opting out of that. It will not happen. I hope to God you all took my email to heart and read these books, looked them over, and really are evaluating what we're shoving down the throats of our children. Thank you.
Next.
I am Chris Quackenbush. We talked about the law tonight lots of times. But what about the law 103.42? The one that says that history should be factual and not constructed. And it gives us careful guidelines on what we will teach and what we do not teach. Why are we accepting a book by Pearson PLC, a British company, that has 4 pages, and I want to leave this with the board tonight. These are 4 pages of lawsuits that have been won by people in this country against Pearson for unfactual textbooks, for errors in testing, for errors in teaching, for many different kinds of things, contractual infractions. Pearson is a notorious violator of the law. And yet you are spending $9 million of our precious taxpayer money, precious education money, on a company that is trash, that is a law violator. And you're talking about laws all the time, trying to be very careful about not violating laws. We're violating laws every day that our kids are reading out of many. That AP US history book that I brought to your attention over a year ago, and you have ignored the law. You have ignored our children. They're learning things like George Washington was anything but a man of the people, that Ronald Reagan was a liar, that Jefferson had slaves and he was terrible, that all of our great heroes were bad. This is wrong, people. What law are you talking about? Because the law we have here, the Florida state statutes, say we should be doing something different. So how can you possibly adopt books like this? This history book, and I have all of the research behind all of the comments that I made here to show the factual inaccuracies of this book. If anyone knows anything about Sharia law, listen to this one. Arab women had no rights before the advent of Sharia law. Now they're equal because of Sharia law. Tell me, do any one of you want to teach your sixth graders something like that? Did you know that Islam was spread by peace? It's a religion of peace. They never pushed their religion on anyone. That's a quote from our book that you're adopting. Please, people, can you tell me what logic you're using when other books are available that are wonderful books? Now, the Mason Academy in Collier County is leading the whole middle school group, a whole elementary group. In their very first year, they're using Hillsdale classical books. We have those available to us. We have other books available to us, and you are responsible according to the law. SB 864 makes you, each one of you board members, responsible for the content of the curriculum.
Thank you. Ms. Quackenbush, your time is up, ma'am.
I'm not going to go into all the things that Chris has in her pamphlet that she's going to be giving you. Believe me, we've worked together to read these books, and I attest that everything in that page that she's going to give you is true. The smut and pro-Islam passages are in the books you are voting on tonight. I would remind every one of the board members that when Jesus asks you why you crammed this disgusting garbage down his throat, and you reply, Lord, when did we ever force you to read the terrible indoctrination in these school books? He will answer and say to them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these my brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. Then he will also say to those on his left, depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. I will tell you, if Jesus isn't allowed in public schools, Islam and Muhammad surely aren't welcome. Mark Twain said, the man who does not read good books has no advantage over the man who cannot read them. So why would we use terrible books? This makes no sense. No amount of smut will be tolerated by good parents. And quite frankly, you're going to end up with some very expensive class action lawsuits on your hands. I do not authorize my taxes to go for that. You can pay for the lawsuits out of your own pockets. If this is what passes for education, I can tell you, we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark Islam in the classroom. No sexual indoctrination in the halls. Hey, Nancy, leave our kids alone.
Before we proceed, let me tell the folks in the back to turn on the microphone, please. My controls are not working. Proceed.
This one's not working?
It is working. Go ahead, ma'am.
It is? Okay.
Just want to be sure it stays on for you.
Wow, that was a tough one to follow. I'm actually the grandmother of coming sixth grader.
Please state your
Okay.
name, ma'am.
My name's Marion Scarrato. Yeah, I read the book, okay, and I personally will rip that chapter out and burn it. I will also take a black marker to every other page that has incorrect information in it and black it out. It's not going to happen. My granddaughter will not read that. That's number one. I also read American Government, okay, and had to decide which one was I? Was I one of them or was I one of them? Because the books, it refers to the Democratic Party as us and we, and the Republican Party as the Republicans, or them. The book was awful. I did nights and nights of research that showed where the inconsistencies were. It's all in my emails that you all got. I didn't receive any responses from any of you, so I'm going to...
I've stopped your time. Please turn on the microphone.
How do you turn it on?
No, not you, ma'am. In the back.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's on now. You can proceed.
Okay. Anyway, since I'm going to pass the rest of it, because yes, the health book was porn, but then it locked me out after that. I once before had mentioned something about the Fourth Amendment, so normally I talk about the best interest of the children. Today I'm going to talk about the best interest of the parents. And the best interest of the parents is the 14th Amendment provides us with the protection against government interference with our fundamental rights and liberty. And for that, I am only going to quote case law. Traxel versus Granville. Washington versus Glucksburg. Stanley versus Illinois. Reno versus Florida. Myers versus Nebraska. And Pierce versus Society of the Sisters. I will file a lawsuit. And I will use every one of those. And Mr. Martin, please look those up, because the last time you misinterpreted Troxel. And you did not read the entire thing, because it says that we, the parents, have the care, custody, and control of the children and the direction of their education, not you.
Anyone else on the right who wishes to address the board? Yes. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Betsy Vaughn, and before I start speaking on the subject of Florida Health, the health book that's being reviewed, I want to say that I am also a parent of an upcoming 6th grader. I'm speaking to endorse the adoption of the high school text, Florida Health, and to add my concurrence to the opinions of 2 of the reviewers that health, including sex education, needs to be taught in all Lee County middle schools as well as grades 9 through 12. I would thank you for your politeness. Schools play a critical role in promoting health and safety of young people and in helping them to establish lifelong healthy behaviors. Accurate sexual health instruction at an early age empowers students to improve and maintain their own health and to reduce risk-taking behaviors. According to a 2013 CDC report, 7% of Florida children engage in sexual intercourse before the age of 13. In Lee County, according to the Florida Department of Health, girls ages 15 to 17, there are 14 births per 1,000 females. 9% of these teen moms have repeat births before they are aged 17. In addition, the incidence of STDs among Lee County teens is higher than the state average. In accordance with Florida statute, the McGraw-Hill text, Florida Health, covers abstinence and no other form of protection or pregnancy prevention methods. I agree with 2 of the reviewers that Lee County has wisely added supplementary information about birth control and methods of guarding against STDs. Although some contend that sexuality curriculum encourages promiscuous behavior at a young age, actually the opposite is true. Kids who receive comprehensive sex ed in school are more likely to delay sex and to have a deeper understanding of the issues related to sexual violence and consent. Finally, there are those who believe that sex ed is not appropriate for school.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
Sean Hartman. I actually wasn't going to speak personally. I haven't actually read what if everyone is criticizing. My personal opinion as a younger individual, as an individual who is probably the most recent of the majority of us here out of school, I do believe we do need some sort of comprehensive sexual education. I do believe that is important. I don't know exactly what has been read, and I'm sure I don't know what is deemed so inappropriate. But I have a strong concern that it might be an over-exaggeration, possibly, what I do want to say is this, is back during the debates, you, Mr. Teuber, had made a suggestion that I personally support and I think should be an option in terms of all of this, which would relieve everyone's minds. Let there be two versions of sexual education in which parents like the ones over here who have a disagreement of it, who want to keep it more personable in the home, they should be allowed to opt their children out into a much more, what they feel would be as a much more appropriate sexual education for their children. This will give control, as Ms. Carotto had said, back to them. I do believe that parents should have the penultimate control over how their children learn this type of stuff. This is a very sensitive topic. I do personally believe we do need to have some sort of option for a more comprehensive sexual education. As Ms. Vaughn had said, the statistics are there that those with more comprehensive sexual education, age-appropriate sexual education, have a less likely of teen pregnancy of STDs. I don't know the exact statistics, but I have heard that we have probably one of the highest STD rates in the state in terms of our county. So I do support a comprehensive sexual education plan, but I do believe parents should have the option to opt themselves out to find a more appropriate method that they feel would be better for their children. I think at the end of the day, I think the best thing is to figure out what is best for parents to decide what is best for their children, and I hope you all agree with me. Thank you.
Else on the right side. Yes.
Back in April, when the school board did rule that the children would be held harmless, initially I wrote and published an article with the fifthcolumnnews.com praising the school board, and I believe I sent each of you a copy of that, as well as our governor. Mr. Teuber, thank you.
Are you referring to either of the two items for the public hearing? Yeah.
No, there will be another time you can speak to.
Hearing of the public on non-agenda will be after this special hearing. This special hearing is only on the adoption of the textbooks and on the contract extension.
You know, friends of mine, I have been included on what is in the textbooks. This is my daughter over here who is going to be an up-and-coming fifth grader, so obviously she's going to be affected by those textbooks as well. I do have great concern. Having worked in social work for 13 years, mostly with children and also with the state in various ways, I feel that what I have seen is pornographic. The pushing of a religion, just anyone in particular, is offensive and should be kept separate from state and education. And if I wanted to, give my daughter a religious education, I would give that myself or send her to a public school. I disagree with the fact that it was only open for a time period to be looked at. I wish I would have known back then had I, been able to take a look at and actually see this material. Now it's not available for the public to see. I'd like to know why not, and definitely in the future I will be paying much more attention to what is being taught. And just for the record, I'm sending my daughter next year, transferring her to an F school that is rated by the county, and that is because of the fact that it is my belief that the schools are graded on how well they adhere to the standards. And this is a STEM school, and I look forward to the future of the STEM schools and hopefully doing more independent education than cookie cutter Common Core. Thank you.
Is there anyone on the left side of the auditorium?
Is it working now? Okay. My name is Tara Jenner, and as many of you know, I do homeschool my children. In that capacity, I act as a teacher. I have several degrees under my belt and speak multiple languages. I love history, and I've traveled to Germany, Belgium, Norway, England, Spain, Venezuela, Korea, and half a dozen other places where I've lived for over a year. I was educated under the British system, which was standardized tests after 2 years of training. And I did learn American history through the British. Pearson is British, by the way. And I can tell you it's a totally different kettle of fish. My biggest concern with the history text that they have is the distinct lack of source documentation as reference sources. Anytime I see a textbook that does not have direct source documentation, it to me is nothing better than a tabloid that you'd find on the side of a supermarket shelf. Honestly, it is biased, but even if it were telling exactly what I believed, if it was lockstep with my thoughts and lockstep with what I know to be factual, I would still vehemently object to it for lack of having source documents contained in that particular text itself. That is unnecessary in this day and age, especially with our internet access, having hyperlink accesses on the back of the source documents in the textbooks. It happens all the time. You get books everywhere that have this contained in there. It is unnecessary, it's unprofessional, and it is, in my opinion, having done a lot of the research, also exceedingly inaccurate to boot. When it came to the health side of the house, I polled my children. I have a 6th grader, coming up 6th grader, and a going into 11th grade / dual enrollment category child. And I asked my teenager, what did she think about this? And her comment specifically was, Mom, can I take bleach and pour it in my head and rinse out my brain after seeing this? Because once you get this in your head, you can't get it out. This information is way too detailed, way too graphic. It is not about health. It is about sexual orientation and pushing a particular type of behavior and format. I would hazard a guess that despite the fact that we've heard some wonderful statistics tonight, that it's a little bit biased. I mean, let's be really honest. We had one lady who was talking about why this was beneficial, and she talked about repeat pregnancies. Wait a minute. Obviously, they didn't get the message when they went through it firsthand. How are they going to get it from the book? And I'll be honest, I sit and I teach my students, and I have a small group of kids who I actually have the authority to be parent to as well, and they zone in and out when you're teaching them, and they always zone in at the wrong point. They're going to pick up all the wrong pieces of this information, and they're not going to catch the parts that are beneficial. I encourage you to not adopt these two texts. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on the left side of the auditorium? Please come forward. Thank you.
Amy Hall. My new title is Executive Pastor at Vineyard Church, Fort Myers. Being a woman with that title in South Florida is somewhat controversial, so I'm no stranger to controversy. I will tell you all that. I have reviewed 2 of these textbooks, and I would like to urge the board to consider what we're putting in front of our children. There are better options. I am not a super conservative individual, but these books are very, very scary. I went over the health book for hours, and I was floored. And I spend a lot of time volunteering with teenagers at all different public and private schools in Lee County, and I think we can do better for our children. I really do. I think there's better options out there. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board that hasn't had the opportunity to do so? Seeing none. I will now close the public hearing and reconvene the regular school board meeting. Dr. Graham, would you please restate your recommendations?
Approval of contract extension for Florida Southwestern State College for Florida Southwestern Collegiate High School, Lee, a 9-12 grade school covering a term from July 1, 2015 to August 31st, 2015.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
By Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? Ms. Fisher?
Yes, I just have a question about why the extension of the contract is only for a month.
Mr. Martin?
The current contract for this school is a 5-year contract, which was the initial contract they were provided after applying for charter school status. We're coming to the end of that contract on June 30th. We've been in negotiations. They've been somewhat of a hard negotiator, doing the best they can to protect their interests, and we're just not resolved with every issue. So this is to extend the current contract for a couple of months until we can resolve the long-term contract.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
The board conduct a public hearing on all objections received concerning the board-adopted instructional materials for the 2015-2016 instructional materials plan. After conducting the public hearing, I recommend the school board confirm its April 28, 2015 action adopting the proposed instructional materials plan.
Is there a motion, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier,
Second.
seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Discussion. Mrs. Dozier.
I will not be supporting this public hearing this evening, as not only did we have information about the health series and the supplementary material, which I think there's a better place for it to serve children than in our public schools. As far as the world history book, I think that it is very clear that when you have a book that does not have sources, primary sources, even secondary sources, I think you have a problem. And I cannot support this. And since I voted against the entire package back in, I think, April when we voted on it, I will vote against the entire package now. Thank you.
Ms. LaRiviere.
The difficulty is that, and this is where I find the difficulty with finding primary and secondary sources for this time period, because it covers ancient civilizations through just prior to the Middle Ages. So not all of those primary sources are I haven't found a lot that are readily available. So I understand your concerns. I also understand concerns about American history. The way the social studies and the history components are addressed, we've got American history in 5th grade. American history comes back again in 8th grade. American history comes back again at 11th grade. World history and ancient civilizations begins in 6th grade, so they understand it ties in well with what then happens then for 7th grade when we look at geography, and you begin to understand.
I'm going to ask you two to please be quiet so that we can hear Ms. LaRiviere.
Begin to understand how cultures, religions, all of those components come together to understand a culture. I'm just giving some background piece. When you get to world history in 10th grade, the world history then goes into modern times, and that's when they do deal with what happened with Stalin and all of the other components that people want to hear about, and rightly so. And we do see more of those, with the exception of the 8, and I will agree, there are no primary source documents for the Out of Many book. You know, I agree, that's a problem with that book. There's a problem with that book when you look at who the authors are. When I look at the authors here, people have made the comment that this was written by people outside of the United States. It's all American authors. They're all researchers. Some of them are very conservative people. I have to look at it in general and say, how do I feel about the book in general? I also have to look and see what the academic plan and see what exactly is being taught to the students and what's covered. There's no way they're going to cover through the whole book in the year, not to get to the depth and not to do the other components we want the students to be able to do with their critical thinking. I've seen, if anybody has a criticism, it's been those of the Jewish faith, because they have found that there was more attention paid in the past to Christianity and to Islam. And granted, we need to make sure that all of those pieces are covered. I look back at the academic plan and for exactly how it's scheduled and slotted out. There is a total of 1 to 2 weeks that deals with the benefits of Christianity and Islam and things that happened. There's world trade that happened during the dynasties that took place there. There was a lot of positive things that happened during that time. I don't see it necessarily as a result of a religion. I see it as a result of the people in that society then, and at that time, it was a very blanket society. There were no dynasties.
Excuse me, would you please be quiet? Thank you.
So I spent extensive time, and if anybody's going to have a problem, the one primary source that is in here is the primary source of Paul's missionary journey and his landing on Malta and how he shared Christianity. Many people would find problems with that, but in reality, that's the only primary source in there, because we have the rewritings, we have those texts that we can go to. I look at it all, and we need all of the faiths. We need all of the cultures. We need every person for their value and what they can contribute. People speak of jihad. If somebody's going to be upset about jihad, it's going to be me and my family, because our family was affected by jihad. So I know what that's like. My family probably is the most gracious family to people regardless of who they are, regardless of their culture, regardless of their religion. It has to go beyond that. So with regard to the World History book, I'm going to be in for it. I find more in there that's good for resources for our teachers to pull out than that's bad. I do disagree with some of the comments with regard to Islam that I don't believe are accurate. I think they're trying to, in the effort of being neutral, they did not give an accurate picture. Maybe they were thinking about sixth graders. With regard, and I have to break it down, with regard to the Hope book, I will still support it, because we have to make sure we're meeting the needs of all students. Yes, every parent has a right to decide whether or not they want their child to have that instruction. But I sat down with students because parents asked me to explain things to their child because they couldn't do it. We have to take care of those needs. Sorry, I got a little emotional.
Other discussion. Mr. Teuber.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Ms. Dozier. I think the history book is woefully undocumented and supported to say things subjectively. And again, it's not even the amount of the one content over the other, but the summations and the summaries of what they, what one religion over another religion happens to say, and it's subjective in content, and that's my problem. The health, I opposed the last time it was for a vote. Dr. Graham had assured me that the supplements and the book itself I was pretty much okay with. It's the supplements that go, I believe, way beyond. And so I was assured by Dr. Graham that they'd be separate, and they weren't. And so I opposed it in total, and it failed, and it passed. So I don't support the supplements. I agree, and I've said it numerous times that I wanted it to have the ability. I appreciate, Ms. Fisher's position, being her extensive, her health experience, that there is a problem in Lee County, and I don't want to hide the fact from those issues that we have people that don't have the proper parenting in their homes. But we could easily make it that if you don't fill out, just like they fill out the forms for the photography or whatever, if you don't fill it out, it means that a parent's not being involved. You get the one that teaches the things that you're probably not going to get at home. But if the parent says, no, I've got it, then they should have the supplement that doesn't have it. And so, I believe we could, if we choose not to pass it today and go back, I think we can do it right. I just don't think there's enough public comment and there's enough board members here that we're just not doing it right. Just by saying that one size fits all, I don't think is a solution. And I also feel very slighted the fact that despite my discussions with the superintendent, she didn't even separate it out. And then I believe the last time, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ms. Dozier tried to separate out the motion to actually pull those issues out and approve the rest, and that failed. And then later on, Ms. LaRiviere said I didn't even know what it meant, because we didn't. We have somebody new. It's hard to know all the procedural rules. So but at that point the vote's been cast. So Ms. La Riviera, now's your chance. You know, you didn't get a chance to stop it back then, you can stop it now. So, you know, you can go with myself and Ms. Dozier and say, I'm not going to approve it now, make the superintendent go back, pull it out, and let's do it right. Let's agree, there's areas that we all agree on, those we can move forward. The areas we don't agree on, let's work them so that we meet the needs of all of our parents, meet the needs of all of our students. If there's subject matter that's not right, let's take a look at, is there other alternatives that meet that road? But for us just to do it, you know, by somebody's admission on the board when they say, well, I don't agree with some of it, well, if you don't agree with it, then don't approve it. Don't just say, well, most of it's okay, then let's just stop and make it all okay. We have the right, we have the ability to make it all okay. And so I you know, and it may take a little bit extra work. I'm willing to do that extra work. So I won't be supporting this because I don't think that we're doing what's right for our students. So.
Other discussion. Mrs. Dozier.
I'm going to take just a minute to share with you some of the history as far as lawsuits in regard to Pearson. They have been flooded with lawsuits back as far as 1998. In 2007, I found this, you know how we're all going to taking tests on computers. Well, the students were not able to log on, and then when they were able to log on, they were logged off. In Mississippi, the subcontractor program's correct answers and incorrect, resulting in erroneous results for almost 4 years, during which time 126 students flunked the exam due to that wrongly scored items. The auditors criticized Pearson's quality control checks, and the firm offered $600,000 in scholarships as compensation to those students. In Florida, there were tests delivered, they were delayed by more than a month, and nearly $15 million in fines were imposed, and they were paid by Pearson. If we're in it to try to make money off them, maybe that's what we need to say. In New York in 2013, and I find this really interesting because New York, we know, is not known as a conservative state. The new Pearson Common Core textbooks are full of errors, including in sample test items. That keeps coming up in all of these lawsuits. Again, in New York, another Pearson was fined $7.7 million by the state of New York for using its nonprofit foundation arm to steer business to the firm. 2014, Florida, the State Commissioner of Education seeks penalties after 26 counties suspended Pearson's new computerized test because server problems prevented students from logging on and froze their screens. In New York, printing errors resulted in missing questions and blank pages in Pearson's designed statewide math assessment. In Texas, STAR test answer sheets shipped to Pearson and they were lost, requiring all the students to have to come back in the summer to retake the exam. Wonder how that would go over in Lee County. In 2014, in Virginia, error in scoring Pearson's SOL civics and economic test questions resulted in 500 changed test scores, including 224 students moving from failing to passing. And that's just a few of them. This is not nearly all of them. And if that's not enough information, there's plenty more out there for you.
Dr. Graham, I'm going to ask you if you would please quickly walk through the textbook adoption process, who's involved, what our options are with respect to textbooks.
There was a committee, the books were available for the public to review from February 13th through
Let me just start back with, this comes from a list of books approved by the state, correct?
Yes. We look at publishers, send whatever the state has said is adoptable in Florida, for lack of a better word. And then we have committees, and we allowed anyone who applied to be on those committees to participate. There is training that that those who want to review the books go through, because part of what you have to look at is if the materials align with the standards, and how to assess a book. The publishers all come in and give presentations on their texts, and they talk about not only content, but they also talk about what ancillary materials they offer, et cetera, et cetera. And then the committee each committee met, and we had committees for each book. We had, I remember the health was one, so they don't meet about all the books they have, and they can sign up for the ones they want to meet for and that they're most interested in. And then they choose which one they believe is best, and then that recommendation is brought forward.
Thank you. Other discussion?
May I just say one other thing, just so there's no confusion. Community members can review textbooks whenever they like. If they come to the district office, the curriculum department will be happy to share with them. And texts are available at school sites, and once the books are adopted and in the schools, they are available at the school sites, but parents have access through ParentLink to their children's books. So there is access at any time. It's just that open to the public was during the period when we were trying to determine which ones to bring forward for adoption.
Thank you. Other discussion? Mrs. Fisher?
Okay, yep. I have a question regarding the adoption of these textbooks as a package. If we were to ask for more time to continue review of one of the books, how would that impact this tonight?
The statute establishes a process for the review and adoption of instructional materials. It requires that after you initially adopt an instructional materials plan, which you did on April 28th, that there be 30 days allowed for parental objections to be submitted to those adopted materials, and you chose in policy, the school board did, to make it broader than just parents. After that 30-day period passes, the statute then requires that you hold this public hearing and adopt the instructional materials plan or confirm it, make a final decision after you hear the objections within that 30 days.
Okay.
So with respect to any of these materials, you have to act before the 30 days is up, or you would have to start the process all over again.
Okay, and then piggybacking on Mrs. Morgan's question about the textbook review, in addition to the public speakers, I received some emails, and one person stated that she was on the committee, but she was not allowed to vote. Her vote couldn't count, and she happens to be a health educator, so.
The expectation that was laid out when people volunteered was that they would attend all 3 sessions if they wanted to vote. They could come to any one of them and be part of the conversation, but if they weren't at all 3, they were unable to vote.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And you know, in regard to the health book, you know, all I can say is, in my opinion, and on behalf of the youth in this county, it's too little too late, and we should be doing it much sooner than 9 through 12. So, thank you.
Ms. LaRiviere?
Correct me if I'm wrong. The world history was originally adopted in 2012? Yes, okay. And then that was, and you weren't here during that time. That's why I'll look at staff. Let me ask the question. I just need to ask the questions. So for that process, and the reason that it did not proceed at that time had to do with running out of money because too many other books were being purchased at that same time, because we did all of elementary reading and all of elementary math. Got it. That's what I thought. When does the world history come back up for review again for adoption? Because then I know that right now it's not part of the regular cycle. I'm sorry. 2018. I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to be asking, but I need to, I apologize. Here's my question I want to go with this. Is it possible to vote to, is it possible to go ahead and vote for each individual book at this time so we don't do any, so if there's something that doesn't go through, so it doesn't inhibit the purchasing of textbooks for school for the next coming school year?
Yes, that would be a motion to divide. It can be a motion to divide by separating out one of the texts, two of the texts, all into separate votes, however you wish to address it.
Then I would like to make an emotion, not emotion, motion, to divide by each textbook, and that we vote on each one individually.
So we have a motion to it. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Fisher. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. So motion carries 3-2. So we'll separate them out.
Yes.
Take a motion book by book?
But you don't need a motion, you already have,
Sorry, yes.
it's separated into, I'm not sure how many books there are, but however many
5.
parts. 5.
Aye.
We'll need 5 votes.
So, Dr. Graham, I'll rely on you to,
Well, and I don't know that I brought the titles with me, to be honest.
If you look back on 97 under the agenda, it has all titles.
Okay. Thank you.
my computer's frozen, so I can't see the list. So I will rely on you.
You want to look at this over here? There's all 5 of them.
Oh, okay, thank you.
In fact, I might have, no, I don't have them on the agenda. They're not on my hard copy. Let me see. $97 on the agenda.
We'll go back to public hearing.
And the titles,
Are on page 97.
the actual
About an inch
titles
from
for
the
the
bottom.
book are below.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Martin. The first one is 912 Health and Physical Education, McGraw-Hill, Florida Glencoe.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the text?
You have a motion, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Just a discussion. and
Just
vote.
discussion? Okay. Discussion on the textbook? Any more discussion on this textbook? Seeing none, all in favor?
This one,
sorry.
I'd like to further divide. Can I further divide this? Make a motion to further divide the main book from the supplements.
I guess, yeah, the answer is yes. Are the supplements part of the adoption?
The supplement, it's,
We could do it.
when you did it last time, the supplement
the
was part of it.
supplements were
It was an
included.
option, but it was included when they ultimately voted.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, it can be an option.
Yes, it can be divided.
I move to divide the main book from the supplements in this particular topic.
I will second it for discussion, but I am not going to support this or the recommendation because according to people, some of the people that I have heard from, out of the 68 standards that are supposed to be taught, this book doesn't cover, it barely covers less than half of them. And also, they have, in our course, they have combined health and PE, and there's only a couple of chapters that is devoted to PE, and that's not enough of content material for the PE class. Therefore, the entire book, I think, should be thrown out because they weren't, I think the people were not considering the objective of what the course was. And I think that some of the people maybe that would have spoken were not there to speak about that issue. So I will not be supporting it.
Okay, discussion on the motion to separate the supplemental book from the regular health textbook.
Excuse me, a motion to divide is not debatable.
Oh, it's not? Okay, thank you. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need to,
Opposed? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was it you just said, Mr. Martin?
A motion to divide is not debatable. You don't have discussion on that issue. You go straight to a
Okay,
vote.
got it. Thank you, that's what I need.
Just voting. So all in favor of the motion to divide?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Oh. Aye. Okay. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails 3-2. So back to the adoption of the book and the supplement together. All in favor?
Well, any further, yes, for discussion?
Oh.
Because now it's the whole thing, you want discussion.
Discussion?
Ms. Revere.
Ms. Revere.
And I also received the same letter regarding the standards. And typically, and very few of our teachers for physical education follow a textbook for that piece. They're more by this, it actually is by the standards in the task. It's not.
When they're in the classroom, they need a textbook. When it's raining, and we have some rain in Florida, so they need something for when they're in the classroom.
All right, well, I was just reviewing the different standards. I was trying to incorporate all of the pieces. I see that it could be used because during that time could be when they would take care of the nutrition or the other components that are
But
in
that's
there.
being taught in health.
But the HOPE class this is HOPE.
Right,
It
right.
incorporates it all. That's what I'm looking at their standards and what's covered in the academic plan.
Mr. Toiver?
Yes, thank you. Based upon the supplements, I won't be supporting it, but also I think it bears further negative treatment, the fact that Ms. Dozier made that comment that we've had, if it doesn't cover everything, I think we can do better. So that's all. I won't be supporting it.
Ms. Fisher?
It's my understanding that this 912 Health and Physical Education book used for the HOPE course occurs for 1 year during the high school career, typically 9th grade. Am I on target with that? It's not used for the whole 4 years.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So during that 9th grade, I mean, we've had HOPE in the high schools during that 9th grade or whatever year students are assigned or opt to take it. And it includes both health, which would be, nutrition, other healthy lifestyle habits, and physical education combined. So, it's nothing different than what we've had before, that kids have been using, and the teachers have been using. It's not not a diversion. There are limited chapters on physical education, but the physical education part is taken care of more through physical activity than classroom learning. So that would explain why that is.
Ms. Fisher?
No,
No.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Other discussion? No? All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 3-2. My computer's come back, so I'm trying to find page 57.
97.
97.
912 World Language, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Spanish 1 through 4, and EMC Publishing French 1 through 4. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. I'm sorry, I left Harcourt out.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Toiber, were you?
I was for.
Okay, motion passes 4-1.
Secondary math, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Secondary math, Cengage Pre-Calculus, and Math for College Readiness.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Social Studies, Pearson Grade 6, World History Advanced, and Grade 12 U.S. Government Honors.
Discussion? Mr. Toiber?
This one, again, I just think we can do better.
Other discussion? Ms. Revere?
And Mr. Martin, if we, what's the time frame that if we don't choose something, then we have to go back to the drawing board with this?
Well, you'd have to go back through the whole process, which would be an initial adoption, and then an opportunity for a submission of objections to that adoption, and then within 30 days later, another public hearing such as this. So it's a minimum of 60 days, but it wouldn't work out quite that way because of the scheduling of your board meetings over the next couple of months. Yes.
And the other question I have is, these books were not hard copies, these were our electronic help me out, I can't remember. And that's what I need to verify.
I think some of them were paperbacks.
But are they, some of them I thought were available electronically? Yes. So the students will have access to them electronically. Okay, that's what I need clarification on. Okay.
Other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion fails 1-4. Is that the last textbook?
Yep.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is non-agenda public comment. Mr. Martin, please address the agenda item, non-agenda public comment.
The rules that I provided before still apply at this time. The subject of comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The items that are on public hearing, including the instructional materials adoption, can only be addressed at that time, so you may not address that issue at this time. The time allowed per speaker is 3 minutes. First speaker is Mr. Don Armstrong.
Good evening, Board. For the record, my name's Don Armstrong. What I'm going to be talking to you about is teachers. But before I start talking about that, I want everybody, the Board, Mr. Martin, the audience, everybody watching, to think back about the teacher that affected your life. The reason why I say this, because I can name a few of them from elementary. Even some of the board members know some of my teachers. From, Miss Fisher, you know Jay Jackson, Mr. Moser, Mrs. Fields, Mrs. Haynes. Even one of my administrators in high school, who at the time I thought really didn't care for me much. And now I look back and go, she was just trying to make me a better man and make me grow up. And I actually have to thank her. Actually, I'll do it tonight, personally. Thank you, Ms. Dozier. The reason why I bring this to your attention is I want you guys to think about our teachers. That half paycheck that they might be short, for whatever reason it was, their reason, our reason, doesn't matter at this moment. It's communication, and we have to learn to be more communication with these teachers, our staff. They're going to be hurting. And we need to start looking at different ways that we can help them. Look, I'm a single father. I know what it's like to live off that salary. They struggle. They plan and plan and plan. And I think we need to start looking at different options, even if we have to send out monthly newsletters to remind them what's going on. They deserve that respect, because somewhere down the road, even you, Dr. Graham, a teacher, impacted your life. We have some great teachers here. I'm afraid we could lose them because of something like this, you know. We're still going through a recession. It still hurts them. So we need to start looking at, as a community, as a board, what we can do to help our teachers out and to make sure this doesn't happen again. So I asked the board and Dr. Graham to please start looking in different ways to make sure this can never happen again to our teachers. They deserve it, because they're there for our kids. It's time that we stand up and we're there for them. Thank you.
Next speaker is George Fox.
I'm not talking about finance. Yay! It did distract me that at the briefing this afternoon, because I did have a comment in the regards with the spaghetti strap issue, Steve, that you know so well. In the policy that the board adopts in this is, the one thing I haven't heard about is giving any student out of the code a reasonable chance to get into code. Through all this, the girl stood up here and said, I'd have put a jacket on if someone had given it to me. So I think if you do adapt some type of policy, that should be first and foremost, because they're only kids after all, and they do make mistakes. So that's all I had, my only comment for tonight. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Barbara Cosma.
My name is Barbara Cosma. I'm a staffing specialist with the district, and I'm speaking about the paycheck issue. I'm aware of the fact that Article 1502 sets the pay delivery for the initial paycheck of the year, and I know that that's a binding contract. However, I am asking the board to consider looking at Article 1803, which would allow for discussions to amend that portion to consider a stable August 15th paycheck delivery each year. One of the things I'm sure the board is aware, maybe others also, is the fact that the legislature made some changes that caused us to have to make changes of our own in our school calendar, and the impact has resulted in a delayed paycheck. I've been in this district for 8 years, and I've always received an August 15th paycheck until this year. One of the things I'm not sure has been taken into consideration is the tax ramifications of the action. With the first paycheck coming August 31st, that shifts more of our salary for 2015-16 school year into the tax year 2016. It's my understanding that the legislature possibly has rescinded the requirement that we start as late as we have to start this year for the next school year, and that we might consider moving back to an earlier start date. If that happens, again, what will happen is that more income from the 16-17 school year will be shifted also into tax year 2016. So for some people, that could end up having an impact on such things as their tax bracket or the taxability of Social Security, as in my case, my husband is beginning to collect Social Security, and how much income determines how much of that Social Security check is taxable. So there's a tax implication here of shifting around money that needs to not happen. We need a stable, predictable, calendar year-based pay delivery system that does not fluctuate. Additionally, there was another tax implication because of not having that August 15th paycheck. That meant that we did not have income to cover the pre-tax deductions of premiums and whatnot that would otherwise have been paid from an August 15th paycheck. Last year, we received a partial paycheck, August 15th, 2014, but from that, the premiums, the pre-tax deductions and the after-tax deductions for premiums were taken from the last August 15th check. In addition to the financial impact of not only having a delayed paycheck, but also having, in my case, an additional $830.
Thank you, Ms. Cosman. Your time's up, ma'am. Next speaker is Mr. Kevin Regal.
Hello. I wanted to discuss the progress or decline in the education of our students under Dr. Graham and her administrative team. During the first full year with this administration at the helm, the data shows shocking declines. Number one, the number of students in Lee County in reading scoring at grade level or higher was tied for the lowest score spanning the last decade at 59%. Number two, the number of students in math scoring at grade level or higher was the second lowest score over the last decade at 62%. Number three, the writing scores dropped again, coming in at 55% of students writing on grade level or higher. This is the lowest score in Lee County schools in the modern era. Number four, the number of students in science at grade level or higher stayed exactly the same from the year before, which was Dr. Burke's tenure. Scores did not increase, and as the science exam scores begin to be reported for this year, we're soon to see another drop in scores based on those. Under year two, the results are being released this summer. Number five, fifth grade science scores dropped again 2 percentage points from the previous year. We're now 2 points behind the state average. Number six, eighth grade science test scores dropped a percentage point, and we're a point behind the state average. Number seven, high school biology test scores dropped a dismal 7 percentage points. We are now 8 percentage points behind the state average. Number eight, 11th grade high school U.S. history exam scores dropped 3 percentage points. We are now 6 points behind the state average. Number nine, the number of A schools decreased from 38 to 36. We're down 5% in that area. Number 10, the number of F schools increased from 7 to 10 before the cut scores are shown. That's an increase in 43% in failing schools in this district. Number 11, the number of positions in this administration has increased, as has the budget. I just noticed Dr. Spiro went from $97,000 to $117,000 and got a $20,000 raise, unless I'm wrong. These results we see do not match the increase in spending. In fact, we're decreasing and going in the opposite direction while we're growing this administrative team despite poor performance. These results are unfathomable. How do we tolerate these results over the last 2 years? Thank you for listening.
Next speaker is Ms. Jennifer McFadden.
I've been teaching with the school district of Lee County for 12 years, and the complicated pay schedule has caused financial hardship for me as well as many other employees of the school district. And I'm asking that we put an end to all of this, these problems with the pay schedule and just pay everybody. Now that we're on direct deposit, we're able to do this. There's no more paper checks, and we're not bound by the school schedule as far as pay periods and paychecks dates. Why don't we just pay everybody on the 15th and the end of the month and spread it out evenly over the entire calendar year and avoid all of these problems from happening again in the future? Because this has happened before, and it's really hard for us to get through the summer financially. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Ramey Hall.
On April 29th, every parent with a child enrolled in a class that would be given an EOC was sent an email from the district office stating that the 30% would no longer count.
I'm sorry, proceed, excuse me.
tonight, 3 of you voted to change your vote. I think you guys have made a terrible mistake for Lee County students. The data that was discussed here tonight is very hard to understand. We were told the civics information I paid close attention to because my daughter took that test. We were told the civics test had a 97% pass rate. We don't even know what that means. We are going to see tons of students drop letter grades. They may not fail the class, but they may go from A honor roll to B honor roll or no honor roll at all. Our children went into these exams told they would not count. I have the email. You think that the spaghetti strap issue went national? Wait on this, because I'm telling you guys, what you just did to our children tonight, I'm appalled. Last Monday night, I was at a meeting at my church, and there was a teacher sitting in my group who was so upset she could barely speak the entire meeting. I pulled her aside afterwards and asked if something was wrong. She told me she was faced with canceling her family vacation due to her paycheck being about $1,000 short. What are we doing, you guys? We are going to put teachers back in the classroom in August, worried about paying their bills. Is that how we want teachers starting kindergarten? Can you imagine having a room full of kindergartners worrying if your water is going to be on when you get home? That's the situation. I'm working with other churches to see how we can provide food to these teachers in August that are going to be short. For single parents, it's a huge, huge problem. $1,000 may not seem much to a lot of us, but for some people in our county, it is huge. I urge you guys to act on this tonight for our teachers, and I also urge the 3 of you that rescinded your vote to think long and hard, because I promise you this will be national news if you leave it how you just voted.
Those are all the cards, Ms. Morgan.
Mary Orthodox Sue?
What happened here tonight was a travesty. When I came to this board and I gave the information about the 30% when you voted out, I gave accurate information. But don't take my word because I'm uncredible. You can go to the Tampa Bay Times, go to the archives, pull up August 15th, and see exactly what Pam Stewart said. State messed up, now you're letting them bully you. And by doing that, what example have you just shown our children? What have you taught our children? I can change my mind anytime I feel like. If you're not going to be accountable, why do those children have to be accountable? And it's awful odd, it's the same 3 that ride in the car together to different meetings. You can laugh all you want, Pam.
Right, we did.
Yeah, I know you did. Now I have to ask what sunshine laws were violated along the way. You guys made a decision, a statement went across this district, and then you rescind on your decision. Oh, it's going national, and there's going to be a lawsuit. The citizens have had enough. I think there needs to be a recall on this whole school board. Now, the statistics that came out. Thank you, Kevin, I was going to do that. How do you sit here and justify renewing a contract and giving bonus money to a superintendent that's failing our children? You can live with yourself and put your heads down on your pillow at night with a clear conscience. 2 of you were going to make a motion. Jeannie, I do commend you for trying to bring a discussion on the contract. Shame on the rest of you. Either you guys are not paying attention to what's happening across this district, or you really do not care. And it tends to the people, the ones I'm talking to in the public, you don't care. You're more worried about what the state thinks. Well, let me explain something to you. Statutes are not laws, people. This is a common law state. The state is in violation of the Constitution. You are in violation of the Constitution by abiding by unjust laws. And in doing so, you are hurting our children. And then you're going to sit here and say, we care about your children. We're here for the best interest of your children. You just screwed them royally tonight. Shame on you. I hope you're proud.
Chris Quackenbush.
Mary tells it like it is. And I must too, because it's true. Thank you, Jeannie, for standing up on many occasions now. And thank you, Steve, for backing her up and standing up too. And thank you all for voting that terrible book down tonight, the 6th grade My World History. But I'm sorry, we'll have to agree to disagree after that, because playing with Pam Stewart in the sandbox is not as important as keeping promises to our kids and to our parents and to our district. Over and over and over again, we feel like, wow, what did just happen? Did they go back on themselves again? What's going on here? We can't trust them at all. And as far as the review of Nancy Graham, I have never seen a contract renewed for 2 years beyond the next election without even ever doing a review in public. What kind of order of business is that? Why was it that you didn't have the review information available to all of you board members on that day so that you could discuss it? I believe the answer lies with Nancy Graham and her ability to manipulate the agenda along with the board chair. So I'm really worried about how this board is run, how the district is run, and I really wish that we could have a real board that makes real decisions with real people in mind. Thank you.
Bob Belenda.
Sorry, I've had to revise this throughout this meeting because so much has gone on tonight that I couldn't hardly believe my eyes. And as a result, I really think that we need to put in a full liquor bar, maybe right back here. We could raise some revenue for Mr. Fox. Okay, all joking aside. Mrs. Graham, ParentLink only lets us see what's already in use. That has nothing to do with us finding out what our kids are going to be using next year. So to say, after it's already done and adopted, you can go on ParentLink and see it, that's not a credible statement. Also, you've heard me speak to you before about the adoption process. I was on the HOPE process, and if you remember, I only attended for the first 50 minutes because it was mind control. It was ridiculous. The adoption process needs to be changed. It's flawed, okay? And I really urge at least the 2 members that are willing to do something about something to look into that. That adoption process for next year needs to be changed. Okay, I'm very concerned about comments from board member Mary Fisher regarding our red shirts, saying that you support the First Amendment, but we can't be taken seriously by you because we attack someone personally. Have you read the First Amendment? Have you read the Federalist Papers? Have you read the Anti-Federalist Papers? Are you aware that every single solitary founding father understood that popular speech needs no protection? That it is unpopular speech, and in fact disparaging speech, that specifically needs protection because speech that goes against government officials is in danger of being quashed by tyrannical beings. If you seriously think that we shouldn't be taken seriously because we verbally call out for Nancy Graham's or any tyrant's removal, then you clearly don't understand the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution as a whole, or the Founding Fathers' reasons for asserting sovereignty of the citizenry over government. And if we can agree that you don't understand those things, we can then by extension agree that you do not understand your role on this board. It is not to be a unit or a team and have 5-0 votes. You're not supposed to be buddies and ride together to across-state meetings, talking with each other out of the sight of the sunshine. You 5, and soon to be 7, are supposed to be adversaries to some extent, representing the people who elected you, not each other. I would hope that you would spend more time criticizing your own actions and that of the superintendent than worry about protecting her from the sovereignty of ticked-off citizenry. If you honestly thought for 1 second that your words would somehow intimidate the citizens, I assure you, you misunderstand the citizenry and the founding of this once great nation. Thank you.
Mary Scrota?
Scarrato. I don't need to come to these meetings. I'm a grandparent. I can watch on Channel 99. So, do you know why I come? Because I watch your face expressions and I watch the way you interact. I can read people. Before a vote, I see one look at the other. Just now, with the comments, I seen one look at the other. As you can tell, I'm making eye contact with you like a puppet with a string. That's exactly what I see when I come here. It's almost entertaining because I already know you rubber stamped everything before we got here. That was very clear and evident. So I don't need to be sitting here, and neither do anybody else. That's the reason why we haven't packed your room. We don't need to. We've seen it firsthand. You ran in the election on lies, and we fell for your lies. We will not make that mistake again. We will not. And yes, what Chris said about playing nice in the sandbox, Mr. Martin, you basically threatened our teachers tonight by saying if they didn't comply, that there could be some kind of a problem. Again, bullying. But yet we have a zero tolerance here, don't forget. Okay? Our kids can't do anything without being written up. How would you like it if we started writing you people up? Oh, that's right. That's why we have the ethics commissions, so that we can write you up.
Kathleen Chercia? Jennifer Long?
Speaking earlier, I have a couple published articles concerning Lee County School Board in particular, and I believe I emailed each and every one of you a copy of my recent one in April when you had passed holding the children, you know, and the 30% harmless. Well, now here sits my child in the audience watching you go back and forth like a repeat of last fall and looking like a bunch of liars and a bunch of hypocrites and somebody, again, that has let her down, and this is just more child abuse happening over again. Thank you, Mr. Toiber, for being the only one to respond to my email and also for your motion this evening. It seems that you're one of a majority in a very big monopoly going on right here.
Sierra Sessa?
Kim suamu gobuki wa dorumi samchongapsa dombangsak chichik kaposa senta wori wori senburika mudusela gorumi horike indan biorak sosangwo ego yange baduki nondolole. Hello, my name's Sierra Sasko, and you're probably wondering what I just said. What I just said is the name of a child who was so loved by his parents that they gave him a long name, including all of the things that had a long life, because they wished the very best for their child. It comes from a Korean folktale. I'm saying this for two reasons. First, I wanted to illustrate the value parents place on their children. The parents, grandparents, neighbors, and community members who come here to speak feel just as strongly about the children in our school district. Secondly, I wanted to emphasize the fact that many people who come here feel that they may as well be speaking in Korean for all the attention you pay to what we say. At the last board meeting, many people spoke out against the automatic extension of Superintendent Graham's contract. My mom even commented that even if you liked the superintendent and wanted to keep her in position, you should renegotiate the contract rather than just automatically extend it, because the terms are not in the best interest of the children, the schools, the taxpayers, or the community as a whole. Not only didn't you listen to those of Those of us who spoke, you didn't even give Miss Dozier the opportunity to speak, and basically told her to shut up by not seconding her motion to discuss the contract. Given the sunshine laws, that was the only opportunity for Miss Dozier had to discuss the position on the matter with the other board members. You must be really scared if you don't even give the matter of open debate. I don't expect you to agree with everything that the people have to say. After all, there's usually more than one position mentioned. However, failure to at least listen and weigh the comments of those who elect you and refusal to even consider each other's opinion is, in my mind, the height of arrogance. Thank you.
Tara Jenner.
Out of the mouths of babes. I'm very concerned by the 3-2 vote tonight regarding the EOCs, with the exception of Mr. Teuber and Ms. Doverger. I would say that the board has shown a very distinct lack of integrity, something that's regularly highlighted on these screens as the word of the week. And Mr. Martin, you've again shown your bias in your legal advice offered to the board. Let me be perfectly clear. Mr. Martin failed to explicitly state a very real risk that the school district is facing because of your vote tonight. By counting the EOCs for 30% of the grade, when it was explicitly stated that this would not happen, you all run the risk of a class action lawsuit brought by those whose grades will be lowered as a result of the, quote, reasonable reliance upon the school board's April vote. I can all but guarantee that a class action lawsuit will occur. On the other hand, threats that the state would withhold finances or have any direct impact on our school district, frankly, would be hollow at best, because they're not going to do anything this far out or this close to an election, and especially when it could harm and impact our students. It is a political hot potato for them to deal with it, especially given their inaction and their misstep on this whole matter. This would be tied up in the courts for decades while they try to recover that money from our school district or withhold it from our school district. I strongly suggest that you bring this issue back to a vote now that the very real risk of a class action lawsuit is known by you. I'm a healthcare attorney. I'm not licensed in the state of Florida, but I'm sure that if you have a conversation with somebody who can talk to you about this thing called reasonable reliance to your detriment and understand that there are serious risks that you're going to be facing here, and you weigh those reasonably, you might want to reconsider this vote. You've done it in the past, and it would be nice to see a reconsideration go the right way this time. Additionally, I'm going to encourage you again, I've mentioned this before, and I believe it might have been Mr. Teuber that hinted at it previously, but I'm also going to encourage you to bring a motion or whatever you might need to do in order to move the seating arrangement between these two so that they're on opposite ends of this dais, so that their conversations come through the microphone for everyone to hear, not just those in the audience, but those of you on the board, because he's your attorney. He's your legal counsel, and it really smacks of an appearance of impropriety and a failure for him to comply with what his fiduciary duty is to you. Thank you very much.
That concludes non-agenda public comment. Board member comments. Ms. Fisher.
I have no comments right now, thank you.
Mrs. Dozier.
I am going to make a couple of comments. In fact, I'm sure that all of you have received the same emails that I have about the pay checks as far as our teachers and the lack of communication or they got the communication, but due to the time that it went in, maybe they didn't see the communication. I had a meeting with Dr. Graham a year ago this past June, and I brought in a company that what they do is they partner with districts and they give loans to employees of school districts, public service employees, police, firemen, just because you have a job, they give you an automatic loan, no questions asked. I believe that I want to say that the superintendent, I called her about this the other night after I had had a few phone calls from some teachers, and I told them that I would call the superintendent and see if there was something that we could do, because our teachers deserve better than what they're getting. And the fact that we communicated with them during a time of year when they've got so much on their plate, I can understand why they might miss reading a newsletter. And like I expressed to the superintendent, maybe we need to send out something that says alert, 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 or something, that really grabs somebody's attention, because the fact that I know if the teachers had known there was something in that newsletter that affected their paycheck, they would have read it. I'm glad that we are going to do something that will provide some relief. However, I am suggesting that we go beyond that. I have had conversations here at this table. In fact, I believe one of the speakers tonight spoke to this. One of the teachers spoke to the fact that, divide our pay up so that we will know exactly what we're going to get every year, no matter what happens with the legislature in changing the calendar, or telling you when you have to change the calendar. I've said it again, and I'm going to say it again. We need to look at taking a teacher's salary and dividing it into 26 paychecks and pay them its automatic deposit, and they will know what their pay is going to be all during the year. And I would say that this is something that in the future we need to look at before teachers are affected by this. As I said, last year I predicted that we were going to have this situation. I sat right here in this building with the superintendent, and I think we had 2 or 3 staff members in there. I'm not sure how many staff members. We had some people from also, representatives from, I know we're here from TALC. I don't remember if SPALC had anybody or not. I'd have to go back on and look at my calendar to see who all was in that meeting. But I said we are going to have a situation next summer because of the time frame of teachers being out and the calendar, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, I was hoping that my prediction would be wrong, but it came to pass. And so here we are, and our teachers are skipping vacations, trying to get refunds on flights because they don't know how they're going to pay their mortgages and everything else. So it's our responsibility to do something about that.
Mr. Teuber.
I was going to have none. The only thing I have to do is, one of the speakers made a comment, and I have to agree with her. I apologize publicly to Ms. Dozier, even though I wasn't going to support her motion for the superintendent for different reasons than people would expect. I should have afforded her the professional courtesy of giving her the opportunity to speak, and for that I apologize. And I have nothing else.
Revere.
And I apologize for the giggle with regarding to the writing together, because we were just discussing that this afternoon, and how we need to make sure we get all of our vehicles here at the district to where they are actually drivable so that we can drive up separately. The intent and the heart of people, the 3 of us, when we rode together to Kissimmee, was because we wanted to save money. And believe it or not, we discussed other things besides anything that would be in the sunshine. Lesson learned. We shouldn't have done it. There was nothing that was, and I kept pretty good track of what we discussed, because I wanted to be prepared just in case. So lesson learned, we won't be doing it again. Payroll. I understand, I knew every time the new calendar would come out each year, I would look to find out what day do I start back to school. And I would automatically start trying to plan and work it out, because it always varied. This was back many years ago. Those who've been hired and working in recent years have seen that, okay, we did have an earlier start date, and people usually did have a paycheck by the 15th. That hasn't always been the case. Several years ago, when Dr. Browder was here, we all were submitting ideas and ways to save money. One of the ways that I suggested of saving money was to, instead of giving teachers a lump payment sum, was to just go ahead and keep the money into that interest-bearing account and just pay it out twice a month throughout the year. I believe that it's something that, I don't know whether it would happen within talk negotiations or how that would transpire, but I hope that with talc negotiations, they will be looking at a 24 pay period so that it's incremented throughout the year appropriately so you know how to plan. And I just hope people use wisdom if they take out any loans or other pieces to make sure you're choosing things that will be the most advantageous to you and your family.
Okay, you done? Okay. And I have no comment. Mr. Martin?
None this evening, thank you.
Graham?
I just want to share that the pay schedule is negotiable and that Dr. Adkins has already been in conversation with talc leadership. Also, the two credit unions, and we've shared this with anybody that's contacted us, have specific opportunities just for teachers and school district employees, as well as there's a contract sitting on my desk to sign that is another company that offers those services with payroll deduction opportunities. It is not our business to promote or tell people how to manage their finances, but it is an opportunity to have another option for those that believe there's an issue. The issue this year is that because teachers are coming back later, they will arrive on August 17th, which means they miss the August 15th pay. Also, we have several options, and we can pay them all year. We can pay them when they work, and then they get it all, and then there's nothing in the summer. And this year's schedule has been a challenge. Dr. Desamore and I have already spoken about that pay schedule, even though it's out there, about making it somehow more, I don't want to say accessible, because it's accessible, but we want to do it more often. And so we've already worked through what that will look like next year. But nobody's been shorted money. There were many, many sample runs done to be sure of that. And the one person that was insistent that she had been shorted was never willing to give her or his name. So we couldn't check that one, but as a result of that concern, there were multiple samples run, and every time the dollars came out correctly. I think the other thing that complicated issues was that benefits had to be taken out because of the timing in August. And so that perhaps people weren't expecting that if they had not reviewed the schedule. So we are working to get rid of any of those types of situations for the future. And again, thank you for allowing me to lead this district.
The next scheduled meetings of the board are on Tuesday, July 28th, when there's a special school board meeting at 2 p.m., followed by a board briefing, a special school board meeting for public hearing to adopt the fiscal year 16 tentative budget at 5:05 p.m., and a school board action meeting at 6 p.m. At this point, having no other business to come before this body, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mrs. Dozier,
Second.
second by Mrs. Fisher. All in favor? Aye.